Hello.
Good morning, I can hear you.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us for the Commissioners' Weekly Meeting on March 5th, 2025. The chairman is not able to join us today, so I'll try my best here. So Commissioner Plant, any introductory remarks or any action on the consent agenda?
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman. I am I am ready to approve the consent agenda.
Excellent. I too would vote to approve the consent agenda. With that, we'll move on to our first discussion agenda item, proceeding number 25 AL-0072TR, an advice letter from Explore Estes. Mr. Gramlich.
Yes. Good morning. I'm Gary Gramlich, the transportation staff, and this is an advice letter to tariff. As stated, is filed by Explore Estes LLC on February 11th. Effective dates March 14th. The carrier also filed two amended advice letters to correct a couple of errors just in the wording of the fares. Explore Estes under a certificate 55972 may provide charter, shuttle, and sightseeing service between points in the Estes Park and Rocky Mountain National Park areas. It's kind of a concentric circle. They're all either 10, 20, or 30 miles, so it doesn't extend out that far. And Explore Estes is filing this today to increase certain of these fares. And they're different distances. The charter goes out to 30 miles, shuttle 30, and sightseeing 20. That's it. It's just the way they were able to acquire the authority. The existing rates were for the charter were to specific locations within the 30-mile area, or just a mileage charge with a minimum. For an example, Loveland was $40 per one-way trip. Shuttle fares were a per passenger per mile charge with a minimum charge within Estes, and then also for the points within the 30 miles. Again, with Loveland example, it was $30 per passenger. The minimum charge was $60. They had also the sightseeing fares. Two of them were for Rocky Mountain Park. One of them was just an hourly tour, and I did have all the rates in the info sheet, but I don't think I'll go through all of those. The charter, the proposed fares are $75 per hour for the smallest vehicle, 1 to 4 passengers, and $100 per hour, 1 to 6 is the proposed. The shuttle fares are, again, a per passenger charge with a minimum of 3 passengers within Estes and 4 passengers outside of the 10-mile radius. Between points in Estes and those named location, again, Loveland is $40 for the shuttle service with an $80 minimum charge. They did increase the number of tours significantly. The tours for Rocky Mountain Park, they have a 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour full day and half day. So they've got about everything covered. They also have tours for Estes Park. The carrier states that their expenses have increased approximately 50% in the last 2 years, and the revenues have increased too, as might be expected because they didn't start business until 2022. But the expenses are the usual: auto insurance, vehicle maintenance, advertising, communication type of things. The revenue, as you see from the info sheet, in 2024, they're still a relatively small carrier. The revenue is only $130,000. The estimate for 2025 is $157,000, and the estimate of expenses is $105,000. But that doesn't include any owner's draw as taken from the revenue. There's also 4 other companies. If you recall, we went through a great deal of conflict on the carriers trying to serve Estes Park in the last 2 or 3 years. But Estes Park Shuttle, Green Jeep Tours, Purple Points Tour Company, and Wildside may also all provide sightseeing service in the Estes Park area. Wildside is by far the largest. They had over $1.3 million in revenue in 2023. The owner of Explore Estes estimates the revenue will increase about 27,000 in the next year and expenses by approximately 16,000. So net could increase by 11,000. But in Estes, as in many mountain towns, the sightseeing is obviously completely based on the number of tourists that visit. So it has a great determination of the revenue and expenses. But I believe that's the information. And I, of course, have a recommendation.
Yeah, we'd be happy to hear your recommendation.
Sure. Would be allow the proposed tariff changes to become effective by operational law on March 14th, the proposed day of 2025.
Thanks, Mr. Gramlich. Commissioner Plant.
I agree with the recommendation.
I also agree with the recommendation and excellent. Anything else you need on this, Mr. Gramlich?
Well, I don't know. I'm sure you have plenty to do here today.
Few more items. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next up, proceeding number 22I-0471R, Regional Transportation District's Corrective Action Plan regarding the Sable Boulevard and Exposition Avenue derailment. Dr. Fishaber.
Good morning, Commissioners. Pam Fishaber with the Deputy Director for Public Safety at the Commission. Today's discussion is going to involve reviewing RTD's Notice of Corrective Actions completed and response to the Commission's request for additional information that was filed on February 6 of 2024, and then RTD's Notice of Correction Actions taken and request to modify final correction action that was filed on February 10th, 2025 for the September 21st, 2022 CAP 3. Commission Decision C-23-0598, which was issued September 12th of 2023, asked RTD 4 questions, 2 regarding the first CAP and 2 regarding the second CAP. The first question for CAP 1 was, has funding for the ATS installation been budgeted and or appropriated, and if not, why not? RTD responded that those project costs were included in the 2024 budget adopted by the RTD Board of Directors and appropriated for 2024 on November 28th, 2023. If the costs exceed the amount appropriated in 2024, RTD staff will prioritize funding for the project costs from non-safety related 2024 expenditures. Second question was when would ordering of the necessary equipment for the automatic trip stop installation occur? RTD responded that the procurement of the ATS equipment would continue after a notice to proceed issued to the construction contractor. The NTP was to be issued in the third quarter of 2024, with equipment procurement to be completed by the fourth quarter of 2025, assuming that there's no supply chain impediments. For CAP 2, the first question was, will RTD be moving forward with the hiring recommendations that were included in the North Highland report? And if not, why not? RTD responded that they did agree with the North Highlands report to increase staffing levels for both their field supervision and lead field supervisors, with an additional 14 field supervisors and 3 lead field supervisors, and they were working towards implementing those recommendations. The second question for that CAP was, had RTD budgeted and or appropriated funding to hire the additional recommended field and lead field supervisors? If not, why not? RTD answered that the 2024 budget was adopted November 28th, 2023 by the Board of Directors, and those appropriated funds for those positions were included, and RTD has been hiring for those positions over the course of 2024. Now for the CAP 3. So by decision C-23-0598, the Commission had closed the 5th interim corrective action requiring RTD to conduct light rail operator education campaign on infractions for obstructing and tampering with onboard cameras. They did provide that information showing that it had been completed with those interim correction actions for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. For the final corrective action, RTD discusses that it had implemented a daily health verification for their light rail vehicles that had the older camera systems, that they have been replaced with the next generation equipment, and they can verify the functionality of the system and can have the information downloaded to servers wirelessly. RTD states that despite their best efforts, the end of the useful life age of the original camera system and availability of replacement parts, RTD says even if pre-service processes are used to confirm the DVR is powered on and recording light is illuminated, it is possible that the DVR may not be recording even when the light is on. So RTD explored options to install monitors on vehicles with older camera systems to test and verify those cameras and DVR functionality. It would take approximately 6 months to install this equipment and estimated to cost $17,000 and 10 hours of time daily for the mechanics to perform that testing. This would still not confirm that the DVRs are recording once the LRV is on the alignment. RTD had issued a competitive solicitation to replace the older cameras with the forward-facing in-cab cameras on the remaining 157 LRVs. The RTD Board of Directors was asked to authorize the General Manager and CEO to execute the contract with the top proposer in the amount not to exceed $3 million, with the intent to install these systems on all of the remaining LRVs by June 30th of 2027. And that's a deadline that's currently outlined in our program standard at Rule 7349B. So for the reasons above, RTD is requesting to modify their final cap from develop a formal process to verify and monitor functional surveillance systems that are in place, including daily checks and ensure camera functionality prior to revenue service, to just develop and implement a formal process to conduct daily checks to ensure functioning surveillance systems on the in-service trains with the new camera systems. RTD states that it has completed that revised corrective action on February 6th of 2025. So there are two issues with RTD's request to modify its final corrective action plan for CAP 3. First, RTD did not come to the Commission to request a change to the CAP and get that change verified and approved before performing that final corrective action. Under Commission Rule 7347D1, it requires that a CAP must be reviewed and formally approved before the CAP can be implemented by the Rail Transit RCA and begin their safety risk mitigation activities. RTD failed to do this when it changed its CAP without Commission review and approval. The second issue is the CAP does not address the issue it was meant to address. The problem that needs to be solved is the lack of recording from the derailment that occurred. While there are new camera systems on 34 of the LRVs, the old systems still remain on 157, which means there's still a chance in the future that accidents may not be recorded. This is the issue that still needs to be mitigated. So if RTD is unable to ensure that the older systems may not be recording after vehicles have pulled out of the yard, what is RTD going to do in the short term to make sure that accidents are recorded until the 157 remaining LRVs have the new systems installed, which will not be until June of 2027? So staff is questioning, can RTD start using the LRVs with the new in-cab camera systems on the head ends of the LRV consists for the short term, starting with the consists on the R line until the ATS system has been installed, tested, and placed into service, and then moving on towards other lines as the additional LRVs are equipped with the new in-cab camera systems. Does RTD have any other ideas of what can be done in the short term to ensure that the head-end vehicles with operational camera systems are being used so that details of any accidents can be recorded? Unless you have any questions, I'm ready to make some recommendations to you.
No, I think you can move on to your recommendation. Thanks.
Okay. First, staff would recommend that the Commission require RTD to answer the following questions. One, did the RTD Board of Directors authorize the GM and CEO to execute the contract with the top proposer in an amount not to exceed $3 million? Second, if the Board of Directors authorized the GM CEO to execute the contract, has that contract been executed? And if not, when will the contract be executed? Staff also recommends that the Commission require RTD to redevelop the final corrective action for CAP 3 to provide a short-term solution for the recording issue to be used on the R line and throughout the rest of the system as the new in-cap camera systems are installed over the next 27 months, including a timeline of when those new in-cap cameras would be installed. And then finally, staff recommends that the Commission close the remaining interim corrective actions for CAP 3.
Thank you. Maybe just one follow-up question for me before we go to votes. You had mentioned kind of some more detailed questions on potential interim solutions and their feasibility. Do you want those in the decision, or are those kind of just verbally to alert them as to what sort of things you expect to be addressed for an interim plan?
Well, since RTD is the one that should be developing the corrective action, the order states that they need to rework, redo that final cap on CAP 3 to address the actual issue and not just the one that they decided to make a change to and have finished.
Okay, one other question from me. You referred a few times to the top proposer for this $3 million upgrade. I'm just curious what that means. Like the most qualified, best option, or top financially? Just a little clarification on what that terminology means.
It would be how RTD procures equipment like that through a procurement process and vetting of any requests for proposals that they received.
Okay, so that was like the top ranked proposal?
Yes.
I guess might be the best. Okay. I was just trying to make sure I wasn't interpreting top proposer meant like by some definition the most expensive for some reason. Just the best ranked. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, appreciate those clarifications. Commissioner Plant, go ahead.
I agree with the recommendation.
I also agree with your recommendation, Dr. Fishaber. Appreciate your explanation and digging into the details as well. Do you need anything additional on this one?
No, is an ABC order okay for this?
Fine with me. Good with you, Commissioner Plant? Yes. Next item, also Dr. Fishaber. Proceeding number 23I-0047R, the Regional Transportation District's Corrective Action Plan regarding the 19th Street and Stout Street condemned rail. Go ahead, Dr. Fishaber.
This one will be much shorter. So RTD filed a notice of corrective actions completed on October 30th of 2023, providing information to the Commission that showed that RTD has completed the 4 interim measures of the CAP. RTD filed a notice of corrective actions completed on February 10th of 2025, providing information showing that the final corrective actions 1 and 2 were complete. While the filing states that RTD has completed the final corrective actions 3 and 4, and the Commission staff reviewed the documentation for these corrective actions, RTD did not actually provide any information as part of its filing to show completion of the corrective actions to the Commission itself. For Commission investigations, corrective action proceedings, RTD is required to file the documentation in this proceeding for the Commission to make a review and determination if the corrective action has been completed. If you have any questions, I can answer those. Otherwise, I'm ready to make a recommendation.
I think you can go to your recommendation.
Staff would recommend that the Commission close interim corrective actions 1 through 4 and final corrective actions items 1 through 2 of CAP 2 for the 11/22/2022 accident and 19th and Stout. Staff also recommends that the Commission require RTD to file documentation in this proceeding to show that the final corrective actions 3 and 4 have been completed, and to do that within 30 days of the issue date of this decision.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree with the recommendation.
I also agree, Dr. Fishaber, and I think that's fine as an ABC. We need a decision on that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, moving on to energy items, proceeding number 24AL-0275E, which is Black Hills, Colorado Electric rate case. And Ms. Friedman.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ellie Friedman of your advisory staff, and with me is Ian Fetters this morning. After you completed your deliberations on February 19th, Black Hills was directed to present revised cost of service studies and rate impacts based on those deliberations in this proceeding. The company did so at a technical conference this past Monday, March 3rd, and we'll be back next week to discuss the results of that technical conference and for your final decision. But this morning, we're seeking clarification on several issues raised in the technical conference so the company can file its revised tariff sheets that it's been directed to file by Monday, March 10th. So there's three issues this morning: rate mitigation, time of use implementation, timeline, and the customer charge. I'll start with rate mitigation, and then I'll turn the discussion to Mr. Fetters. So when Black Hills updated its class cost of service study, the overall, as a result of your decisions, the overall result was a 3.3 million or 29% decrease for the large power service transmission customers. In your earlier deliberations, the Commission directed the company to apply a uniform percentage increase across all rate classes in order to mitigate the bill impact on residential customers. So based on the class cost of service study, the uniform percentage was 9.48%. When applying this percentage to all rate classes, the large power service transmission customers who had seen a decrease would see a revenue increase of about $1 million. The residential class total revenue increase is about $7.9 million, and small general service sees an increase of about $2 million. So Black Hills considered the Commission's concerns in deliberations about the impact a rate mitigation strategy would have on large commercial customers, and the company provided an alternative uniform percentage increase in the technical conference. That increase was 10.13% across all rate classes except the large power service transmission schedule. With that mitigation strategy, there's no increase to raise for the large power service transmission customers, while residential class total revenue increases about $8.4 million, and the small general service sees an increase of about $2.1 million. So I can answer any questions you might have. You might have a discussion, or I can proceed to recommendation on this point.
Commissioner Plant, you want a recommendation, or do you want to go forward with any comments first?
A recommendation would be great.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Friedman.
All right. Advisors recommend the Commission direct Black Hills to use its alternative mitigated rate strategy. That is, apply a 0% increase for large power service transmission and a 10.13% increase uniformly across all other rate classes. This option achieves an appropriate balance the Commission seeks to achieve in mitigating the rate impact on the residential class and the increases that are borne by large commercial customers.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of a no-win situation that we have here. I'm inclined to agree with the recommendation, and so we can sort of mitigate some of those impacts on some of the large commercial entities in the service territory, recognizing that we're already shifting some of those expenses out of the residential, and for, I think, good reason. But love to hear your perspective on it, Commissioner Gilman.
No, I agree with you. I don't think there's a perfect solution here. I mean, I think the problem this endeavors to solve is kind of limiting that rate increase, especially to the residential class. But at least my comments in the deliberations were it could be somewhat sacrificing the idea of bringing in more economic development and business by essentially assigning more of the cost than the cost of service study shows is appropriate to that larger class, which could then kind of defeat the purpose of trying to attract more development in large businesses to increase sales, which then could put downward pressure on rates. So I don't know that there's the perfect solution here. I'm somewhat frustrated that the choices are 10% or 0%. Mitigation could potentially have flavors in the middle to kind of moderate that impact. But on balance, I tend to agree with you and Ms. Friedman. the cost of service study essentially shows no increase at all. So I think it would be most appropriate, and what is honestly a fairly minor impact spread across the whole residential class is a very acute impact focused on a relatively small customer group. If left as it was as an across the board increase. So I'm inclined to agree with you and Ms. Friedman's recommendation here, but would acknowledge, as you did, there's not really a perfect solution here, in that someone's going to pay, and it's not an ideal outcome no matter what. All right, Ms. Friedman, anything to add, Commissioner Plant? Okay. Go ahead, Ms.
Thank
Friedman.
you. I'll turn this over to Mr. Fetters now.
Good morning, commissioners. Can y'all hear and see me okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I'm Ian Fetters with y'all's advisory staff, and I'm going to be talking about two items in this proceeding this morning. The first item is time of use. As part of its deliberations on Black Hill's rate case, the commission made a number of decisions on Black Hill's time of use rates. These decisions included an opt-in structure, uniform 2-to-1 price ratio, and an on-peak time of 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. on non-holiday weekdays for all of the company's rate classes. However, in consideration of the need for customer education on new TOU rates, as well as increased solar generation, the commission ruled to delay implementation of the new TOU rates approved in this case. In the technical conference on March 3rd, Black Hills indicated uncertainty about the timeframe of implementation for new TOU rates. Although a few timeframes came up in the commission's discussion, review of the deliberations indicate the commission ultimately authorized implementation for, quote, after summer 2025. Black Hills notes that they have existing TOU rates in effect, with some customers currently taking service under those rates, and those existing TOU rates are not designed to recover the revenue requirement that comes out of this proceeding. So I can pause for discussion or provide a recommendation.
Commissioner Plant, what's your preference?
We can go with recommendation.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Fetters.
Advisors recommend the company be directed to implement the changes to its TOU rates on March 22nd, consistent with the other tariff changes in this proceeding. This would allow the company to recover its authorized revenue requirement coming out of this proceeding from those customers it currently has on TOU rates. In addition, there are not many customers on Black Hills TOU rates currently, and since the rate structure is opt-in, those few customers should be relatively educated on TOU rates already, and so Black Hills should be able to inform them of the rate change in time for the tariff to go into effect.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I would agree with the recommendation, and I think that, communication with the existing TOU customers as to the changes in the TOU would probably be a priority immediately, but then there could be additional outreach to the rest of the customer base, more aligned with the time frame that we were talking about. I don't know if that's something that you would agree with, Commissioner Gilman, but that would maybe, because it is an opt-in, educate those who aren't currently time of use customers to perhaps switch time of use, later on in the season, or more aligned with what we were trying to drive to after the summer.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with your recommendation, Mr. Fetters. Given the issues with the revenue requirement, it makes sense that adjustment would happen in the shorter term. And I agree with Commissioner Plant that the immediate urgency would be on communicating to customers already taking service on the rate those changes. But I certainly agree with the idea that there is going to need to be some outreach to identify this option for customers, especially given that the decision was made to maintain the default rate as an inverted block rate, which I really worry could provide a poor option to customers who choose to electrify transportation or building uses. And so I think it will be all the more important to ensure that customers are aware of their option to switch to time of use rates, which in several cases could really provide a better option for those customers, especially customers who already have or who are looking to electrify, which could increase their electric usage by, decreasing other expenses of theirs. So agree that there's probably a two-part push here in who they're communicating with, as Commissioner Plant said. Anything additional on this one, Mr. Fetters?
I don't believe so. Thank you, commissioners. Now turning to customer charge. In this proceeding, Black Hills proposed increases to its fixed monthly customer charge for several rate classes, including residential, residential other, small general service, large power service secondary, large power service primary, large power service transmission, and irrigation pumping. UCA opposed increases for the customer charge for the residential other, and small general service rate classes. In the deliberations, advisors recommended, quote, maintaining Black Hills' existing customer charges in the interest of rate stability as well as affordability. However, in the revised rates filed on February 28th, the company maintained the currently existing customer charge for the residential class, but it included an increased customer charge for several other customer classes, including residential other, small general service, large power service secondary and primary, and irrigation pumping. So I can pause for discussion or provide a recommendation.
I think you can go on to your recommendation.
Advisors would like to clarify that the recommendation to the commission was to maintain the existing customer charges for all customer classes. Accordingly, advisors recommend the commission confirm that no increase in customer charge for any customer class has been authorized and direct the company to revise its CCOS accordingly.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree with the recommendation.
I also agree.
Thank you, commissioners. Ms. Friedman, is there anything else on this proceeding today?
There is, and I realize we took a little out of order. So I think now we can go to Ms. Dundas, who will address the motion filed by WRA.
Thank you, Ms. Friedman. Good morning, commissioners. I'm Lindsay Dundas of your commission counsel. And just for clarity, the points that Ms. Friedman and Mr. Fetters just went through will be incorporated into your or clarified within your final written decision based on the deliberations earlier in the month. However, the motion that I'm going to present today would be its own interim decision. So as Ms. Friedman said, on February 25th, WRA and Sierra Club filed a motion to supplement the filings ordered by decision number C25-0122I. By that decision, which was issued on February 20th, the commission scheduled a conference before an ALJ, technical conference before an ALJ, which was held on March 3rd, 2025. And the commission also ordered the company to file several updated draft tariff sheets and other filings to assist the commission in drafting the final written decision in this proceeding, the last of which of those deadlines is March 10th. Throughout the proceeding, WRA and Sierra Club proposed two voluntary heat pump rate options that it asserts comply with Senate Bill 24-215. Those included a seasonal rate and a seasonal time of use rate. At oral deliberations, the commission discussed their proposed rates, but declined to order the adoption of either within this proceeding. In their motion, they request that the commission direct or at least encourage Black Hills to evaluate a version of their proposed heat pump rates that would be made available to all residential customers within its updated COSS and CCOSS for further consideration prior to a final commission decision. They argue that doing this through the filings required by C25-0122I would provide an opportunity to fully evaluate a version of their rate proposal that is available to all residential customers through this technical conference process. They argue that such an evaluation would provide ample record upon which to approve a modified version of the rate proposal and address the commission's outstanding concerns with it, which could be addressed through applications for RRR. In a response filed the next day, Black Hills Company of Colorado states that it objects to providing new evidence in this proceeding in the way that WRA and Sierra Club suggest. They point out that the commission did not order Black Hills to file this information in the original order, nor did it ask the company to address this information at the technical conference. It argues that such analysis would constitute new evidence which could not be addressed by cross-examination or rebuttal testimony in this proceeding because the evidentiary record is closed. They also point out the time frame for the commission to issue a decision in this proceeding before the statutory deadline is coming up. That statutory deadline is March 22nd, when rates would go into effect, and notes that WRA and Sierra Club's motion was filed too late for consideration at the February 26th CWM. The company argues that the motion should be denied as untimely, outside the scope of the purpose of a technical conference, and rejected as an attempt to introduce new evidence after the record is closed and without sufficient due process. So I can pause here for questions or recommendation as to whether to grant this motion.
Commissioner Plant, anything before our recommendation?
No.
Okay, go on, Ms. Tendon.
Thank you. I recommend denying WRA and Sierra Club's motion as moot. The motion was not filed with sufficient time to consider the motion or receive responses prior to the technical conference and associated filing deadlines, which, as we noted, already occurred on March 3rd. So the motion's moot. I also agree with Black Hills that the evidentiary record on this proceeding is closed and no new or additional evidence was or could have been obtained at the technical conference. So I'd recommend denying the motion and finding that the filing requirements and deadlines established by decision number C250122I are unchanged.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree with the recommendation.
I also agree.
Thank you. That can be an ABC decision denying this motion, and then, as I stated, the rest of your clarifications will appear in the final order.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, next, proceeding 24A-0442E, Public Service Company of Colorado, approval of its 2024 Just Transition solicitation, discussion on upcoming joint technical conference with the DSP proceeding. Mr. Eden. Oh, I guess maybe I should say the other proceeding number. Is that proper to help you out?
Yeah, that would be
okay. The distribution system plan proceeding is proceeding 24A-0547E. So to my understanding, we'll be having a joint discussion across both the JTF and DSP proceedings with you, Mr. Eden. Go ahead.
right. Thank you. And good morning, Commissioners. I'm Michael Eden with your advisory staff. So this morning I'll be presenting two matters in Public Service Company of Colorado's current electric resource plan, or ERP, referred to as the Just Transition Solicitation, or JTS. And this first item is the unopposed motion staff recently filed for an extension of time to file the scope of work for the Independent Transmission Analyst, or ITA. After your vote on that matter, then I'll tee up your discussion on the joint technical conference scheduled for March 13th. In both this proceeding and in proceeding 24A-0547E, which is the company's 2025 through 2029 distribution system plan, or DSP. So starting with the ITA, in the phase 2 decision in the company's 2021 ERP, the commission adopted staff's recommendation to implement an ITA in the JTS as a way to provide independent transmission and power flow modeling expertise among staff, Colorado Energy Office, or CEO, and the Utility Consumer Advocate, or UCA. And going forward, I'll refer to staff, CEO, and UCA collectively as the state agencies. The commission stated that ideally, the ITA could assist with the modeling in phase 1 of the JTS, so that there's a third-party expert in phase 1 to help test assumptions about total costs for different portfolios, inclusive of both generation and transmission costs. In this JTS proceeding, Public Service and the state agencies filed an ITA scope of work on December 31st, 2024. The commission subsequently directed certain modifications and clarifications to the ITA scope of work and required staff to file the finalized scope of work after the retention of the ITA, but not later than February 28, 2025. On February 28, staff filed its unopposed motion for an extension of time. Staff explains that while it and the company have met with and received proposals from several of the potential ITA candidates, a finalized agreement has not yet been reached. Because it has not yet retained an ITA, staff requests the commission extend the time to file the final scope of work until 7 business days after the retention of an ITA. If staff has not retained an ITA by March 14th, staff states it will file a notice with the commission providing an update on the ITA status. I'll pause for your discussion on whether to grant staff's unopposed motion, or I can present a recommendation if you'd like.
Commissioner Plant, what's your preference?
We can go with the recommendation.
Right, go ahead, Mr. Eden.
Thank you. So advisors are disappointed staff hasn't yet retained an ITA, given that answer testimony is due on April 18th. It would seem that the time for an ITA to assist the state agencies as a phase 2 decision contemplated is growing short. Nevertheless, advisors recommend granting staff's unopposed motion and requiring staff to file the final ITA scope of work 7 business days after the retention of the ITA. Hopefully, this will be completed prior to March 14th, but if not, staff should file a notice with the commission by March 14th, 2025, fully explaining the status of the ITA retention process. We similarly recommend waiving remaining response time to the unopposed motion.
Thanks, Mr. Eden. Go ahead, Commissioner Plant.
Thank you, Commissioner Gilman. Yeah, I agree with the recommendation. I have to say, it's incredibly frustrating. We asked for this over a year ago, and we're getting down to the wire on analysis of a fairly large resource plan that has huge implications on transmission system, and a lot of the decisions that we make are going to impact what those costs are on the transmission system. And it seems to be the one aspect of the system where we have very little visibility and very little understanding, very little analysis. And, that's exactly why we, wanted to have this expertise to contribute to our decisions. And so, every day that we miss at this point, we're losing some of that insight into those fairly large and significant investment requirements. And so while I don't I don't have any alternative, and would support the recommendation, it is a disappointing process.
Thanks, Commissioner Plant. Yeah, I agree. And of course, we want to acknowledge, I understand staff's busy. There's a lot going on here. But I really share your urgency here. A lot of the issues we saw in the last ERP with essentially generation being selected agnostic as to what looked like nearly $2 billion in transmission expenses. That would be a result of the solicitation and of load growth is not a situation we hope or expect to repeat here. So the intent was to really be able to have outside expertise to analyze and optimize, especially in the phase 1 process, around options to ensure that our generation selection and bidding process could have specific ways to ensure that we're looking at optimizing costs across the system, including that transmission system. So I share your urgency for the intent here, and really a hope that someone will get on board in time to be really helpful and impactful. But I'm concerned that answer testimony deadline is coming up quite quickly. So I'm not sure how quickly someone will be able to work to provide that necessary information to the state agencies to ensure they can really effectively advocate for solutions that optimize those costs for ratepayers. But certainly that's the goal, that's the hope. I agree with you. I don't really see what option we have at this point besides to grant this, but certainly hope that our urgency is shared by staff in those state agencies who I think really stand to benefit from the information and their advocacy that this output would provide. So I agree with you. And is that what you need today, Mr. Eden, on that one?
Yes, and we were planning on doing the ITA matter as a separate decision. So is it okay if that goes out as an ABC decision?
It is. Thanks.
Thanks. So as I referenced at the start, this next matter concerns the March 13th Joint Technical Conference in both the JTS and the DSP proceedings. As the Commission articulated in earlier decisions, the intent of the technical conference is to allow the Commission and parties to have more transparency regarding certain critical forecasts and models in both the JTS and DSP proceedings. While interveners to both the JTS and the DSP will be provided with the Zoom login information prior to the technical conference, only commissioners will be allowed to ask questions. Joining the Zoom session will allow interveners to observe the technical conference in real time, including any confidential session that might occur, assuming interveners have signed all necessary non-disclosure agreements. And then, regardless, the technical conference will also be transcribed by a court reporter for those parties who are unavailable on March 13th. Although the technical conference was initially scheduled for March 20th, at the request of Public Service, the Commission recently rescheduled the joint technical conference to March 13th. Due to this scheduling change, the Commission now only has 5 hours to cover a significant amount of material. To help ensure that the technical conference is as efficient as possible, advisors recommend the Commission set an approximate agenda focusing on the topic areas on which the Commission intends to focus. If you want, I can put forth a recommended agenda to start the discussion, but I'll pause first for your direction.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for you to provide a proposal.
Okay. Advisors recommend the Commission adopt an agenda covering 5 topic areas. The first category would cover EVs and managed charging. This would include forecasts and models underlying assumed adoption rates for both EVs and plug-in hybrids, participation in managed charging, both under existing programs and future expanded programs, and existing and future load shapes for charging. This category would also cover impacts on coincident and non-coincident peak demands and distribution constraints at DSP. The second category is beneficial electrification, or B. This would include adoption rates and efficiency curves, including any backup fuel sources for heat pump water heaters, air source heat pumps, and cold climate air source heat pumps. This category covers load shapes for such devices and resulting coincident and non-coincident peak infrastructure requirements, including after factoring in existing and expanded load management and demand response program. The third recommended category is the 8760 process for peak load forecast and load seer. Although the 8760 load shapes for EVs and BE would be covered in the first 2 topics, this topic would look more broadly at how the company used the 8760 process to develop peak demand forecast in the JTS and how the 8760 data is incorporated into load seer for the purposes of the DSP. The fourth proposed category is the long-term residential customer rate analysis. This category would include inquiries into the differences between the distribution capital budget in the JTS versus the DSP. Another potential issue to explore in this category is the analysis and drivers underlying the cost savings seen in the lower low scenarios. And then the fifth category would be a miscellaneous category. While this category could cover several topics, perhaps the primary issue would be the forecast for large new loads such as data centers. This would include the anticipated load shapes and potential for demand response associated with these large new loads. And then finally, as a general matter, advisors recommend that company be directed to clarify the specific modeling approaches used in each proceeding, including any instances where the modeling approaches differ, and also be prepared to answer questions to the extent possible through demonstration of the company's models or the input files to these models. Also, the Commission should make clear that the agenda adopted today refines but does not replace prior Commission directives regarding the technical conference.
Thanks, Mr. Eden. Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I just had one quick question about sort of process. So you mentioned that they can interviewers can watch this on YouTube and that there'll be transcripts, but that'll also be saved on YouTube, right? So they can watch it at any point. It can be asynchronous as well.
Right. The expectation is that just like any commission or public meeting, There will be a YouTube recording that's available. There's a link on our website. However, again, if there's a confidential session, then that portion would not be available on YouTube, but it would be available through the transcription of the court report.
I understand. And is there any opportunity for the other parties to submit any issues that they had around the modeling or questions that they had around the modeling, assumptions or any clarifications that the parties wanted to have as a part of this technical conference? Do we have any process for that?
There's currently no process anticipated for soliciting input from the interveners at this stage. I think it was always anticipated that the technical conference would be used by interveners through their advocacy through discovery and ultimately answer testimony.
Okay, so they would use the discovery process for any clarifications on modeling that they might have. Gotcha. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that your outline makes a lot of sense. I had just a couple sort of clarifications in terms of the 8760 process for peak load forecasts and loads here. You mentioned how the loads here platform incorporates an 8760 data for the DSP. I'm curious of how that might be individualized across the different distribution systems. So how targeted investments in a specific area of the distribution system might be reflected in load forecasts or reflected in the overall Encompass modeling. I wasn't clear about that, or whether they take that 8760 data as a sort of a whole. So that was one question, and there was some reference in some of the testimony about the expectation that there would be a downward pressure on rates from some of the load increases, but I'm curious of how that is modeled. There wasn't much data on how they're modeling that downward or potential downward pressure on rates, and whether data center loads and consumer loads are treated the same in the model, or are they treated differently in the model, and exactly sort of how that would be reflected in the model. Then finally, in the miscellaneous, what are the load patterns that are assumed for the data centers, and do they differ by the type of data center or the purpose of the data center?
Okay, we can absolutely flag those areas of inquiry in the decision adopting the agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Plant. I had a suggestion. I think along the lines of some of what you were discussing, kind of one of the main differences I could see in the use of forecasting between the JTS and the DSP is the locational nature of the loads impacting DSP, whereas to a much lesser extent, the JTS. So I'm not sure this needs to be like formally articulated or how we actually even plan on getting this agenda out. But as we talk about those foundational like building blocks of the loads, which I consider the first few items, the EVs and the BE, understanding what the company uses or understands for the locational nature of those, which I think, primarily impacts DSP. How do we understand if there will be more EVs or BE expected in one location versus another in terms of how that impacts the actual impacts more granularly of forecasting on the distribution system, although it may be a wash in the JTS aspect of it. The other thing I would suggest is, while I know you mentioned data centers in item 5, Mr. Eden, I would suggest that we just break it out and make it be a new number 3. This leaves us with our first 3 items being kind of the largest foundational building blocks of how we're getting to larger load forecasts. and then, the processes and how these things are aggregated and integrated in as the later discussion points. While this may not be kind of as technical of a discussion as some of the EV and BE points, the data center load growth is projected to be the single biggest driver of the load growth. It's a massive percentage. And I think it's important, first of all, to express the interest and priority of understanding it better in terms of just making it its own line item, but also to provide us that venue to ask some of the questions, like Commissioner Plant had said, what load profiles are being expected. I'm very interested in what, if any, demand response and flexibility the company anticipates, as well as, do we expect these data centers to already have backup? And is that backup then useful as a grid resource when the grid is peaking? Those sorts of questions around data centers. Now, I understand the more specific and kind of negotiation related, probably specific size related aspects might be considered confidential. So I'd also recommend as part of this that we at least reserve the possibility that the last 15 or 20 minutes or something of the technical conference may need to be a confidential session. It probably makes the most sense to just put a pin in the confidential stuff as we discuss or bring up a question if confidentiality is invoked, that then we at least have a plan that at the end of the technical conference, we could move to a confidential session, whether it's on data centers or something else, then we could round out and kind of clean up any of the confidential questions at the end. So that would just be a recommendation as we go forward with that. So I don't know, Commissioner Plant, if those kind of modifications and ideas make sense to you.
No, I think it does, and sort of lumping up the load into the 1, 2, 3 sort of sections there, I think makes a lot of sense, and then having the further discussion on other stuff. And I think it's probably smart to reserve some time for confidential. I'm sure something will come up in the course of the discussion where we might need that time.
Yeah, I think it's at least good to just send the bad signal now that in case we need it, that's what we'll do at the end. And, there might be some modifications to who's joining at the end and access and whatever, but that will mostly be the plan, that we'll have that time available if we need at the end to move to confidential session. So, all right. Any other, Mr. Eden, what's, is this verbal discussion kind of the notice, that the company and parties get? Are we going to make this more formal in some way before? I know it's coming up quick now that it got moved up.
Right. So the technical conference is already scheduled on the public calendar, and the hearing room is reserved. We anticipate issuing, again, a separate decision on this technical conference, showing the refined agenda and clarifying the procedures. So we would hope that would get out early next week or late this week.
Okay, great. Excellent. Anything to add, Commissioner Plant?
Nope.
Okay.
And is it okay if this is an ABC decision?
Fine with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And thanks, Mr. Eden. I appreciate you and Mr. Mendelson, as well as council, helping to work out what I think is a somewhat unique but very necessary process for us to understand across these concurrent proceedings. This information in greater detail at this crucial early stage in the proceedings. So very much appreciate you working on that for us.
Thank you.
All right, last item on the agenda is proceeding number 25A-0050 SG Colorado Natural Gas for an order authorizing a stock pledge, debt refinance, and corporate reorganization. Mr. Davis.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ron Davis of the Commission's advisory staff. On January 21st, Colorado Natural Gas filed an application for approval of certain financing transactions and a related corporate restructuring. In brief, C&G explains that its parent intends to refinance its debt in the second quarter of this year. The planned refinancing is meant to extend debt maturities and to take advantage of lower interest rates, However, to accomplish the refinancing, corporate restructuring is required. I provided a more detailed background on CNG's application last month when the Commission took up the company's procedural request to administer this proceeding expeditiously as a financial securities application. The Commission denied that request and set standard application noticing and intervention procedures, and that brings us to this morning. Trial staff of the Commission and the Colorado Office of the Consumer Advocate have now each filed notices of intervention as of right, and both request a hearing. UCA plans to examine the potential impacts to and the purported benefits of CNG's planned restructuring and refinancing vis-a-vis ratepayers, whether the refinancing and restructuring will negatively impact CNG's ability to request and for the Commission to establish an appropriate capital structure in the company's next gas rate case, the resulting changes in the credit rating and the financial risks for CNG, the resulting changes in short-term and long-term debt costs and whether such costs of debt will be reduced, the resulting changes in any direct or allocated costs, and whether the refinancing and restructuring and approval of the application will promote the public interest generally. And in addition to general statements about the need to examine the organizational restructuring, the impacts on CNG, and the investments and returns at issue in this case, trial staff states that it plans to address the timing for the proceeding and the need for the separation of an organizational restructuring from the issuance of the securities. And as we discussed at the earlier weekly meeting, it's necessary to recognize that in other recent adjudications, including CNG's securities case in 2022 and its more recent application for approval of a cost allocation and assignment manual in proceeding number 23A570G, trial staff and UCA have raised a number of concerns about the corporate structure within which CNG operates. So the question before you now is whether to set the matter for hearing, and I can provide a recommendation if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
I recommend that the Commission deem the application complete and refer the matter to an administrative law judge for a recommended decision by minute entry.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree with the recommendation.
I also agree, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. I think that concludes our agenda. Commissioner Plant, anything additional for today?
Way to keep it running smooth there, Commissioner Gilman.
Got through it.
I have
Excellent.
nothing else.
Almost 5:10. Excellent. Neither do I. Thank you all for joining us. Everyone enjoy your day. Thanks.